Fictional Page presents Read Before Midnight, Season 1, Episode 7, Thursday Special, by W.H. Maxwell, read by the author. A quick word from the author before we begin tonight's episode. First, thank you for being here and returning with us after mid-season break. Your viewership keeps us going. If you want to support us and our stories, please recommend us to a friend. It's the best way to show your support. And now, Thursday Special. It was Thursday, the special, matzo soup. Just past the lunch hour rush, I threw my apron across the steel table behind the counter and sat down to eat. That's when I saw the woman in the hospital gown coming toward me. She waited patiently on the other side for her car to pass, and then beelined for my door. To say she caught my eye would be missing the point. I saw her a mile away. Not too many unfamiliar faces passed through the deli. In a town like Minister's Creek, there are only a few hundred of us all in all, and nobody would have missed a girl dressed like that. She wore sunglasses, aviators, and a short coat that did nothing to hide the gown covering her legs. Her hospital gown tugged in the breeze, and she clung to herself with an arm that was more than half hidden under bandages. The woman walked fast, almost erratically, through the door, little shop bell jingling. She didn't pause, didn't hesitate. She just walked right over and sat down opposite me. "How's it going, Tom?" she asked, shade still on. I was stunned. "It's good," I said. "I'm sorry, but have we met?" "This is Tom's Deli, right?" she continued. "Name's on the sign out front." I felt like an idiot. Yeah, it is. That's me." I put my spoon down, the matzo soup spurling little trails of steam. She pushed her sunglasses down. Two purple and bruised eyes stared back. "It's me," she said after a moment. It had been a long time, but I knew that face. It had changed a lot since I was a kid, and I used to play ball games in the backyard with her younger brother. Also, it looked like something had beaten the hell out of her not too long before. Still, like with most people in a long time, something behind the eyes still shined back all the same. "Amy. My God, are you okay?" I started, almost getting to my feet, but she hushed me back down. "Please, don't. I don't have time. I don't have it with me. I wasn't quite sure what to say or what she was talking about. Look, I got a message from Randy. I'll keep it brief. He says not to go straight home tonight. There's something I have to give you, but I don't have it now. Not on me. I'll give it to you tonight at McQuillan's. Meet me there, okay?" Again, I paused, still stunned. Who the fuck is Randy? She stood up and made to leave. I called out to her before she reached the door, and forever wished that I hadn't. "Hey," I said, sounding like a scared little kid. I think some part of me already knew the answer. "Who's Randy?" Amy turned back to me and smiled again. Her lips cracked and red. "Randy," she said. "Don't say that. You remember him. You remember my baby brother. Don't pretend." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Then she walked back out and disappeared. The bell didn't jingle this time. I knew exactly who she meant, but I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I looked around, hoping a customer was still seated in one of the booths and had overheard. No one else was there, and my second in line, Bobby, was out back smoking a cig. I knew Randy. Randall Van Lars, all right. And I knew he was dead. Long dead. I was there when he died. Bobby came back in stinking like Newports. He was 18, young, but reliable. I hired him 2 summers ago when I took over the deli, and the kid just stuck. He trudged up behind the counter, apron strung around his neck, but not tied down so it billowed a bit off to one side, like a small white cape. "Hey, Tom," he said. "You know the dumpster didn't get hauled off last night?" I didn't say anything for a minute, still too caught up in what she had said, trying to figure out if I had heard right, if it was even real. "Hey," Bobby said again. "Hey, Tom, I said that—" "Yeah, I heard you," I said. "I'll call Tri-County tomorrow and see what's up." "You okay?" he asked, and I looked up at him. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "You just look a little pale is all. I don't want to catch a cold. If you want to go home, you can. I can lock it up all right." "Nah," I said. "Thanks, though. I'm just thinking, that's all." I left the deli around 6 and sat in my car for another 15 minutes. I wasn't sure if I was going to go to McQuillan's. It was the town pub, the kind you find in redneck hideaways like Minister's Creek. I didn't mind the locals. Most were some of the best people you could ever meet. But drunk, that was a different story. If you wanted a good time, it was better just to drink at home. Weighing the pros and cons, I began to think that this was all just some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe she was talking about another Randy, and I had just misheard. But I knew I hadn't. Then I thought it was just some kind of sick joke. Somebody in town playing a prank on me. Maybe someone pretending to be Amy. It had been so long, and she had a lot of bruises and the glasses. I could have been wrong. That didn't make any sense, though. Randy had died almost 10 years ago, and although there were a fair number of weirdos in town, no one would do something this distasteful. Besides, Randy's parents still lived here, and if they found out about it, likely there would be some kind of trouble. And I knew it really was Amy, even with the bruises and the glasses. After sitting in my car, slowly smoking my way through 2 cigarettes, I decided I'd put it off long enough. Whoever was behind this, and whatever it was all about, they were about to get a real earful of shit talk, and maybe even a shot to the mouth. This thing was somebody's bad idea, and it was stupid too. I started up the car and made the short trip down to McQuillan's pub. McQuillan sat behind the local bank. The dirt parking lot was already full of old 2-door sedans, rusted beaters, and enough pickup trucks to fill a Freudian fantasy. I pulled my car in on the far end and stepped out. Walking slowly toward the front entrance, which was, ironically, in the side alley between the bank and the DVD rental place. How the movie rental store had stayed in business through the recession and the rise of digital streaming age is, to this day, beyond me. Loud music thumped its way outside and told me that the party inside was already in full swing before I even opened the door. When I reached for the brass handle, I paused. My hand was actually shaking. I spit on the ground then for some reason. I remember it clearly because it was so out of character. I felt like a cowboy outside the OK Corral, chewing the last wad of chaw before the big gunfight. Opening the door, I stepped inside, gathering a few odd stares from the more bored patrons before finding a seat at the bar. A full 5 minutes later, the bartender, an older woman with a tired expression, meandered over to me and asked what I would like. "A beer," I said. She brought me back one of those light beers without asking, and that was just fine. I sat there sipping on it, enjoying the unique and mildly disgusting flavor without complaint. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and I turned to look. At once, I knew by the look on her face that this wasn't a joke. This was serious business. And whatever this was, I was in deep shit. Amy Van Lars, Randy's sister, spotted me after a quick look around and came over. In her arms, she carried a big box wrapped in newspaper. It looked like a cheap Christmas present that was long overdue, but the way she coddled the thing in her arms, I could see it was important. "Tom," she said, sitting down next to me. "Hey, Amy," I said, trying for some reason to sound cool and nonchalant. I felt like I had no control in the situation, a heat in my stomach burbling up, and that I should just run for the door. The other half of me, still curious, still egging me on, kept me planted and trying to keep a cool demeanor. She put the box on her lap and let it rest there. "So," I started, "is that the thing?" But before I could finish that thought, the bartender came by again and asked Amy what she would like. "Beer," she said, not looking at either the bartender or me. She looked worried, really worried. No longer wearing her shades, the older woman eyed her puffy cheeks, and then me, before shrugging off without a word to go get the beers. I waited until the bartender came back with the beer before picking up again. "Listen," I said, "when you came into my deli today, saying all that stuff about Randy, you kind of scared the shit out of me, to be honest." "Yeah," she said, only half paying attention. She kept giving the room quick glances that suggested something, I don't know what, was going to jump out of the crowd any second. "What's going on with you? Are you okay?" I asked. "Tom," she said, looking at me directly for the first time. "Look, I can't explain, but I need you to take this package." I moved to take the box. "No," she said, pulling away slightly. "Not here. I mean, you can have it, but don't open it here, okay?" "Why?" She looked around again. "Look, just don't open it here. Believe me." What's in it? I asked, imagining something between a bomb and a package of cocaine. It's something special. I didn't make it, so don't ask me to explain. It was given to me by someone else. Who? She squinted her eyes up then and bit at her lips, already cut and bleeding. Someone else. She grabbed her beer and drank more than half of it in one go. Jesus, she's freaking out. In the deli, I said, not sure how to bring this up. You were saying stuff about your brother? About Randy? She cleared her throat. Okay, yeah, I know, Tom. It's been a long time, and it's good to see you. It really is good to see you. And I am so sorry. I am so sorry. But I have to go. Now. She handed me the box and started finishing her beer in one great gulp. Clearly, she was about to leave, so I pushed on. Amy, you were talking about your brother having a message for me? Like talking about Randy like he was still alive, and you said that Randy told you to give me something. A message or... I pointed to the box. This thing, I guess? She didn't seem any more shocked by this than if I had told her the weather report. Instead, she finished her beer and told me one last thing. Tom, just don't open it here, okay? Don't open that here. Go somewhere private, read whatever the letter says, and... Then she just blanked out for a minute, staring over my shoulder with her jaw almost to the floor. Like a scream had caught in her throat. I turned to look where she was staring, at an empty corner table near the jukebox. Before I could say anything else, she muttered that she had to go and left. If the bartender had closed my tab fast enough, or if I had brought cash instead of my debit card, I would have chased after her. Instead, I used my debit card and waited until the bartender came back around, left a small tip on their seat, picked up the package, and moved for the door. The box in my arm was heavy, and it took me a second to finagle the doorknob open. By the time I reached the dirt lot, she was gone. Amy Van Lars. Before the deli, I hadn't seen her since Randy's funeral back in '07. And now, after only 5 minutes of very intense small talk, she was gone again. And what the hell is this about? Standing there in the lot, I slowly realized the gravity of the situation that I'd walked into. Or, more accurately, had walked into my diner. I went to my car, put the box in the passenger seat, and pulled out of McQuillan's. I didn't go far. I drove to the end of the street where the abandoned skate park was and stopped in front. The skate park had been a project back when I was in high school. The town council had decommissioned the tennis courts that used to be there and rebuilt them into a park for teen misfits and stoners to hang out at after school. It was totally empty now, lit only by the overly intense white glow of a single streetlight. I looked at the package. It was clearly a box about 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. The newspaper that was wrapped around it was local and only a couple of days old. I could tell because on one side, the picture of a local high school wrestling star stood looking back at me. The title of the article, Sullivan Wins Big, written above. The kid, Mike Sullivan, had gone to states and won, so it was kind of a big deal and everyone in town had heard about it. But other than that, the package appeared perfectly normal. I leaned across to the passenger seat and began to tear the wrapping off. Underneath sat a cardboard box with a lid. I caught a glimpse of the streetlight reflecting off a metal sheen as I lifted the lid. Flicking on the interior car light, I got a better view of the thing inside. It was some kind of computer or radio. The gray metal was decorated with little knobs and buttons and flip switches. I spotted a mouthpiece with a push button on the side, like the ones used on CB radios. Then I saw the letter, taped firmly to one side of the device and sealed in a manila envelope. I grabbed the envelope and pulled it onto my lap under the car light and opened it. The letter was typed, not printed. It had been a long time since I'd seen an actual typed letter, and it gave the words an almost foreign look. I did notice, however, that the paper was new, white and crisp. Printed paper, the common variety that you or I could find just about anywhere today. That little detail seemed to jar with the typed aspect of the words. A sort of anachronistic mix of old and new technologies. Much like the radio thing itself, which looked straight out of the 70s. The letter was short and simple. Go to the pissing tree. You know where. Do it now. We need to talk. When you get there, turn it on. It's the switch that says on off. Don't fuck around. Don't go home and sleep on it. Just do it now. Another flash of nerve shot through me. I felt my stomach turn into a knot and a shiver run down my back as the words slowly dawned on me. The words that confirmed my worst possible fears. Go to the pissing tree. Against all rational logic, against everything I knew could be real, this was happening. My brain squirmed for answers, for some simple solution, for some way that this could all still just be one big, bad joke. I opened my door and vomited beer onto the pavement. It was the summer of '07, and Randy and I had just graduated from Ministers Creek High School. Go Mountain Cats. One of the many parties of that summer had ended less than an hour ago, and in the hot, sticky summer air, Randy and I cruised down Route 19 in his boat of a Dodge with the windows down. This was not the first time we had taken this road late at night. Nearly all the parties held during high school at that time, and still today, I suspect, were held in a large field off of Route 19 behind a thick swath of trees that kept the action hidden from any passersby. As such, getting home was a familiar dozen-mile drive down 19 back into town. We were only going a little ways. If you're from a city, you might be confused a bit by this term when it's used by someone from the country. In any major city, a little ways was 2 or maybe 3 blocks. In the sticks, a little ways could be 10 or 20 miles. With such distances, isolation, the lateness of the hours, and a few beers running through us, we had grown accustomed to stopping alongside the road and taking a leak when we needed to. One such spot was on our path that night. Atop a small hill on Route 19, there was a large tree just behind the old Avery's truck stop. Avery's had closed down back when I was still in diapers, but I remember the stories our parents would tell us. How it used to be a speakeasy during Prohibition, as well as a gas station. Then sold and bought and sold again, until it finally closed down. The tree, maybe an oak or a maple, I never stopped to check in the daylight, sat alone just a few hundred feet from that abandoned and derelict truck stop. Randy and I had come to know this tree in an almost biblical sense, and it had become a little ritual of ours on our way back from a party to stop and take an honorary piss on the thing. And we'd even named it. We called it the pissing tree. I know, we were very creative. But that's what we called it, the pissing tree. I knew it, Randy knew it, but nobody else, not another living soul, knew about the tree, or the name for it anyways. We couldn't have been the only ones to ever have used it, but nobody else ever called it that. On that hot summer night in '07, heading north on Route 19, we were on our way home. A few miles out, Randy turned down the radio, which was blasting some terrible rap song on repeat. "Hey," Randy said, not taking his eyes off the road. "You ever heard about number stations and the first radio trial?" After a night out and running into the early hours of the morning, our conversations tended to take a turn toward the strange. This is normally when such bizarre and philosophical discussions began, so the question didn't strike me as anything odd at the time. "No," I said, sticking my head out the window to dry some of the sweat sticking to my brow. My eyes caught the little white crosses on the side of the road as we passed. "Well," Randy began, "my uncle was telling me about it the other day. He said that there are frequencies out there, right, that you can't find on normal radios." "You don't say," I said. "Yeah," Randy said, ignoring my disinterest. "These signals, though, right? They're not like normal signals. On the other end, it's just a robot, like reading numbers." I pulled my head back inside the car. "What do you mean?" "Like, my uncle said that it's just a voice, reading numbers in some sort of sequence. It's like spy stuff." "Uh-huh," I said. "Your uncle told you this?" "Yeah, but wait, get this. So you know how the radio was invented, right?" "Alexander Graham Ballsack," I said, trying to be funny. Randy laughed anyways. Not a real laugh, but the kind your friends do when they're trying to be nice. "Nah, man. Graham Bell invented the telephone," Randy said. "Nah, the radio was invented by this guy named Macaroni, right? Or Marconi. They say that when Marconi first invented the radio, he went to send a message from one end of his lab to the other to test it out, right?" Okay, I said. So what? So, get this. Randy paused for dramatic effect. When Marconi turned the receiver on, there were already messages being received from somewhere else. He looked at me with this whoa face he did when he was trying to be both creepy and funny at the same time. What? I said, sitting up in the passenger seat. Yeah, there were already messages out there. Get it? He said. Marconi invents the radio, there and then in his lab. Nobody else has one, but when he turns it on, someone is already talking. Dude, that is such bullshit, I said, looking at him and seeing his sly grin. No, man, for real. Even my uncle says so. Then your uncle is full of shit, too. Hey, man, Randy said. Don't make fun of my uncle. He has diabetes. What the hell does that have to do with anything? I said. He has diabetes because he's so full of shit. Oh, you are savage, dude, Randy said, still grinning. We paused again, sitting in silence. The Dodge hummed down one end of a hill and was getting ready to rise up the other when I recognized where we were. Oh, shit, dude, I said. Pull over at the tree, man. I gotta take a leak. Yeah, me too, man, Randy said. He did this every time. Rock, paper, scissors you for it. He held out his closed fist in my direction. All right, I said. Best out of 3. Go on, shoot. We played 2 games. Randy won both. That meant that he got to go relieve himself on the tree first, while I stayed in the car. A minute later, Randy pulled up alongside the road, near the top of the hill. He got out, leaving his door open, while I stayed put. The tree was only about 20 or so feet from the road, surrounded by tall grass. On the other side of the road was a steep hill that led down into a ravine. With the car shut off, I could hear the little stream down below as the water splashed around on the rocks. I stuck my head out of the window as Randy waded through the grass toward the tree. Come on, man, hurry it up, I shouted. I really gotta go. In a minute, sunshine. You can't rush greatness, he said, bracing himself with one arm against the tree. And the roots of greatness are watered with my beery urine. He returned and hopped into the driver's seat a moment later. I stepped out and began walking toward the tree, while from behind me, Randy started up the car and began to blast the radio again. I remembered that the grass was particularly high that night, coming up a little past my knee. I made it to this tree and started to adjust myself, when Randy shouted back at me, Come on, sugar buns, give it the old springtime showers. I turned back toward the car, began shouting, Hold your and that's when the truck slammed into the front of the Dodge. A deafening explosion of crushing metal and glass erupted into the night. The car was lifted in the air and spun sideways as the truck raced over the top of the hill. I'm not sure, but I thought that I heard Randy one last time. A high-pitched scream as the car bounced, turning and pitching along the other side of the road. I watched as if from somewhere else as it rolled over the side of the ravine, crashing again and again on the way down. The truck stopped briefly, but I never got a good look at the driver or the guy driving. The guy turned his head this way and then that, and then he revved the engine again and took off, tires squealing. I was frozen. It took me several seconds to even process what had just happened. One moment, the car and my friend were there. The next, gone. I looked down, my dick still in my hand, and realized that I'd pissed all over my shoe and down one side of my leg. I collected myself and began running then toward the other side of the road, where the car had disappeared, and then raced down the slope. Using the trees for support, I zigzagged across and back and down the hill until I came within sight of the little stream at the bottom. I could see the car, flipped over onto one side. A tree branch jutted out of the back windows. The hood was smashed, the windshield shattered. And then I saw Randy. His upper torso was half-tossed through the windshield and bent at an awkward 90-degree angle, his face looking up toward the sky. He was covered in blood, and from the unnatural position of his body, the state of his face, and his tattered clothes, I didn't even recognize the human shape until I was shin-deep in the water, moving toward him. Feet from the car, my heart thumping so loud I could hear it in my ear, I knew he was dead. There was blood splattered everywhere along the windshield, and I could taste a metallic, coppery flavor in my mouth. His eyes open upward toward the sky, unblinking. I came up to him, now only inches away, and tried to feel for a pulse in his neck. His eyes focused in suddenly, and he grabbed my arm with his. His grip was an iron vice. I began to try to talk to him, mumbling something like, "It's going to be okay, I'm going to go and get help," and then I realized he was talking. It was faint and raspy. Blood trickled out of his mouth. "The sky," he said, looking up at me. "It's floating in the sky, and the dark man speaks. He's dark, Tommy. He's dark." His leg, the one sticking out through the driver's side window, began to shudder violently then, shaking rapidly. Then it stopped. His eyes faded out, staring off at nothing, and his grip relaxed. I could smell urine and couldn't have told you if it was mine or his. He was dead. For real this time. Randy Van Lars, my best friend since 3rd grade, was dead. I parked the car alongside of the road, the same spot Randy had all those years ago. Flicking on the car's interior light, I reread the note. "Go to the pissing tree. You know where. Do it now. We need to talk. When you get there, turn it on. It's the switch that says on, off. Don't fuck around. Don't go home and sleep on it. Just do it now." Well, I was here. The pissing tree was still here too, slowly waving in the slight breeze, almost like a familiar wave greeting me back. In the years since I'd returned to Minister's Creek, I'd made it a habit to avoid this spot on Route 19. Often, I would take longer detours just to avoid driving past it. It was a bad place, and I could feel it then. A kind of prickle against the back of the head, like a stranger whispering in my ear, or the feeling of being watched, but not knowing from where or by who. I killed the engine and turned to the box in the passenger seat. Tearing off the side exposed the face of the device inside, so I could see it more clearly. Made of dark gray metal, it was actually composed of 2 separate frames that had been screwed together. I examined the buttons and switches on the front. I saw the little metal switch that was set to off at the moment, but kept looking before I flicked it into the on position. There was a frequency panel, kind of like a speedometer, but with frequencies measured in megahertz instead of miles per hour. A knob to the right of it allowed for adjustment. There were perhaps another 40 buttons that could be pushed, some of them labeled, some not. One of the ones that was labeled said X-ER detection function, and another read para.w.anom. I didn't have much experience with radios or electronics, but I was fairly sure that these were not standard functions. Who the hell put this thing together? What had Lucy said? It was given to me by someone else. Don't ask me to explain it. Something like that. Someone else had given it to her. I had no idea what to make of it. It was definitely homemade, whatever it was. Other than that, I couldn't say. I sat there for a moment, looking around. The road was totally empty. It was quiet outside. It must have been going on 10 at night, but even still, it was too quiet. Someone should have driven past by now. But no one did. Deciding I had waited long enough, I reached over to flick the machine on. I hesitated at that moment, my finger gently pressed against the switch, ready to move. I remember thinking then that I could just walk away. I could just throw this thing out along the side of the road and drive off. But I couldn't, and I knew I couldn't. I mean, how often you get a message from a stranger saying that your dead friend needed to tell you something? Fuck it. I actually said this out loud and flicked the switch. Immediately, the machine began to whir and buzz. Some of the panels lit up with a dull red glow. I had never noticed before, but the thing had no visible power source, and I began to wonder what it was doing, or how it was even working, when my own car stereo turned on. Automatically, the stereo on the car began cycling through the channels in rapid succession, picking up voices and songs, and mostly static. The car was still off, but I was getting more than a little scared then, pushing myself back as far as I could against my seat. The device next to me began to produce sound too. It was matching the cycling radio, echoing back the rapid switch of stations. All at once, the car's stereo shut back off. The little display light that showed the time went dark. The device, though, kept cycling stations, and then it went somewhere else, completely off the normal range of radio frequencies. It began to pick up stations I had never heard before. Voices speaking in different languages began to emanate from the tiny speaker on the thing. French, then German, and then what I thought was Russian. And it kept going. The little frequency monitor ticked higher and higher up, now reading 250 megahertz and climbing fast. Soon after that, the voices disappeared in a sea of static. The little turn dial that labeled the frequency as megahertz flipped over, and the needle cycled back to 0. And that's when the voice came through. "Tommy?" the warm female voice said. I knew that voice at once, and it was the last thing I expected to hear. I had thought that I would never hear that voice again, and the sudden shock of the whole thing, the overwhelming emotion of the situation, brought me to tears. "Mom?" I said, my voice cracking. "Tommy, are you there?" she asked. 2 years ago, after a vicious 6-month battle with lung cancer, my mother passed away. It was her cancer and her quick decline that brought me back to Minister's Creek and had left me in charge of the deli. "Tommy?" she asked again, and I realized that she couldn't hear me. Looking at the device, I saw the little handheld CB microphone on the side and pulled it up to my mouth, pushing in the talk button. "Mom?" I said again, tears now bubbling over my eyelids and streaming down my face. "Tommy? Turn it off. Turn it off, Tommy," she said, sounding scared. "What? Mom, where are you?" I already knew where she was, but I didn't know what else to say. "Are you okay?" "Tommy, don't listen to him. Turn it off. Turn it off. Turn it off now, Tommy." There was a sense of urgency in her voice. Again, I had that creeping feeling that something was very wrong, and that I was somehow in danger. "Mom, what do you mean? What is going on?" "Do you know?" I said. "Tommy, just turn it off. Don't do it. I love—" But there was a sudden burst of static, and her voice cut out. The needle on the machine pulsed up ever so faintly, and there was a sudden whine. And then something else began to speak. "Don't listen to her, Tommy." A voice, gravelly and rough, like a heavy smoker's voice, said, "We need to talk." I stood motionless, and the voice rumbled again. This time it sounded more like a man's voice, a younger man's voice with each word. "We need to talk, Tom. Tom, we need to talk, Tom." I clenched the microphone in my hand. It was Randy. Was it Randy? After all these years, I had long forgotten exactly what his voice had sounded like. Even still, I thought I recognized it. That same slightly high-pitched kind of nerdy whine that he had back when we were kids. "Tommy boy, you still there?" he asked after I didn't respond. "Yeah," I said, thinking then that if my mom was right, if that had been my mom, I should just shut it off now. I moved my hand slowly toward the on-off switch. "Don't do that!" he barked at me, and I froze. Could he see me? I looked around through the windshield and the back windows. No one else was around. The trees in the forest massed in shadow. The pissings tree still waving gently. Almost too frightened to look, I had a thought and turned to where the car had gone into the ravine all those years ago. I expected to see Randy walking up the hill toward me. He wasn't. "Tom, listen to me. Listen to me very closely. I don't think we have very long," Randy said, and he sounded sincere, almost gentle. I pushed the talk button back down. "Okay, I'm listening." Good, good. Remember the night of the crash? The night I died?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. I remembered. "That guy, Tom. That guy in the truck, the one who hit me, he's still out there, okay? He's still out there, and he's gonna kill someone else again soon. Believe me, I know these things now. He's gonna kill someone else again in the same way." "What?" I said. The guy in the truck had never been found. I knew that. I never saw who it was, and I didn't get his plates in all the confusion. The police had searched too. For a little over a year, they had called up every auto body repair place and junkyard, but nothing turned up. "Yeah, I know it's pretty fucked up, but here's the thing. You can stop him." I said nothing, just sat there staring forward. What the hell did he mean I could stop him? What did he mean that he was going to kill again? The feeling I had was surreal. None of this felt possible. None of it should have been. You still there, Tom? Randy to Tom, do you copy? Randy said, almost jokingly. I'm here, I said. Randy, what do you mean by he's going to kill again? He's a drunk, Tom. A no-good, dirty, unremorseful drunk, Randy said. There's a lot of them out there, Tommy. Drive down the road, go to the bottom of that ravine, right? And this guy, he's going to get drunk and behind the wheel again. In 3 days, he's going to plow through Main Street and mow down a kid. An 8-year-old boy this time, Tom. What? How do you know this? I asked. Randy sighed, a strangely familiar sound that I recognized from our time as kids together, that told me he was getting impatient. Look, I can't explain everything, but I do know that this is true, and that it's going to happen, he said. And deep down, you know it too, don't you, buddy? He's going to hit a kid with his truck and kill him, I said. Yeah, well, no, not exactly. He doesn't drive the same truck from then, if that's what you mean, but yes, he's going to go and get pickled and run down this little kid just like he did me and take off. It's the same thing all over again. Randy said this, now sounding a bit more urgent. The radio device then flickered a little bit, the lights on the display fading out briefly. A burst of static over the speaker followed. I had the idea that whatever connection Randy and I had right now was about to fade out. Tom, we don't have long. Do you believe me? He asked. I did. Yeah, man, I believe you. Then you have to stop him, he said. Well, who is he? I asked. Randy laughed then. Oh, wait till you get a load of this. You're going to love it. He took a deep breath, and I briefly wondered why this was necessary for a dead guy. This guy, the guy who killed me and took off, it's Mr. Wilson. If I had been able to express any more shock or surprise at the time, I would have. But somehow the idea that our middle school math teacher had run down Randy and kept driving just rolled off of me at this point. I remember thinking, yeah, okay, old Mr. Wilson is a drunk and he killed Randy and he will kill some kid with his drunk driving too. Okay. Math teacher, Mr. Wilson? Yeah. All right, I said, mustering up myself. What should I do? Slash his tires or total his car somehow? No, Randy said. You have to kill him. This sent me back again. Like murder him? I said. Yes, Randy said. It's the only way, Tom. Why can't I just mess up his truck or kidnap him? He can't do it if he doesn't have a truck, right? No, Randy said. It doesn't work that way. It's bigger than that. He is meant to hit that kid and kill him. Look, if you messed up his car, he would just get another one. If you tried to kidnap him, something would go wrong. He would escape, or you would get distracted by other things, falling trees, tripping and bumping your head. Anything you can imagine would go wrong, and it would. That's how these things work, okay? You have to kill him. There's no other way. But, I began to say. Then the needle on the device dropped down a little, and I lost Randy for a moment before it picked back up. Tom, I heard Randy say. Yeah, I'm still here, I said. You have to, okay? I know it sounds crazy. I know all of this must seem crazy, right? Your dead friend calling you up on a box and then asking you to kill your math teacher? It must seem nuts. I know that's how I would feel. You're right, Randy. It sounds totally fucking insane, and I'm thinking I need to be committed, I said. You're not. This is real. This is more real than anything else ever. You have to... Then the needle plummeted. All at once the transmission cut out, replaced with a heavy snow of static. Slowly, the foreign voices returned, and then the radio station. I tried to finagle the thing back up. I pushed a bunch of buttons. None of them seemed to do anything. I flicked the switch back to off. Again, I was alone on the side of the road, sitting in my car. It was quiet. That was the first time I noticed how much I was sweating. My shirt was drenched, and my whole body was shaking slightly. I sat there for another hour, just thinking, hoping the machine might work again. It didn't. Chief Everett watched the interrogation video next to Trooper Chris Maddock. "And that was his explanation?" Chief Everett asked Maddock, stroking his mustache rhythmically. "I mean," Maddock rolled his eyes, "not dealing with the most sane and sober person here, Ev." "Jesus H. Christ. Hell, Chris, you can say that twice. That's plain for anyone to see. But the idea that Tom Johnston went plumb crazy and shot his old math teacher out of the blue, well, it just sits sour to me." "I hear you, Ev," was all Maddock managed. "Anything to this whole box thing? Was it real?" "Well, yeah, he had some kind of weird radio with him," Maddock said. "We put that down with evidence along with the gun and the rest of the things we found. Leslie and the team already sealed everything at the scene, and we're waiting on the lab guys from either Pittsburgh or Philly to show up, but they can't figure out who they're going to send." It was Chief Everett's turn to roll his eyes. "And what about when you told him about the truck driver? The one that they found a few years back for the Van Lars accident. We got that guy years ago." "Yeah, I told him about that," Maddox said. "Told him about how the guy came and confessed a few years after. DA sent him upstate for a decade, so him shooting Wilson didn't make any sense at all." Everett shook his head. No sense to the thing at all, that was for sure. The whole thing was backwards inside and out. "Anything on the girl?" he asked after a moment, almost pulling at his mustache now. Maddox's face made a little grimace then, as though he had tasted something unpleasant. "So I did do some calling," he said. "And Amy Van Lars did stop by her old house, her parents said, just the other day. They said she had been in some kind of car accident and was all banged to hell. They say that she stuck around for a couple hours and then split. That much at least checks, but then when I called the residency they gave me for her up in New York, I got some guys saying how her roommate had been killed in the car accident before some other guys showed up at the hospital with a box for her. And he says Amy just up and disappeared after that." Maddock puzzled something for a minute longer, then added, "He said it was like she saw something scary in that box or something. She never even checked out of the hospital." With Tom in lockup, the DA could begin to settle things in the next few weeks. In moments like these, he strongly regretted the county's decision to turn Ministers Creek over to the state office. Let old Sheriff John sort this last one out. Instead, Everett let Maddock go for the night, or what was left of it, and resigned himself to his desk until the team from Pittsburgh or Philly could get up here. He looked at the picture of his wife on his desk and thought of how he could be asleep in his bed right now if it hadn't been for this whole mess. A murder in Ministers Creek, after all this time, and now on his watch? Son of a bitch, he thought. Opening his desk drawer, Everett lifted up a few files and removed a small flask he kept hidden for such occasions. The whiskey was old, and tasted like the metal it was in, but it was sweet fire all the way down. He thought about the story Tom had told, and he thought about Route 19 and the old Avery's truck stop. It was, after all, still up there, rotting away. And when it had been opened, all those years ago, long before he had ever been a trooper, how many accidents had he been called out to on that stretch of road? How many people had stopped there, or stumbled out of Avery's, half drunk or already to it, and tripped around through those fields to relieve themselves on that tree? And how many little white crosses were stacked along that route? Everett could see them in his mind, laid out in front of the lone tree, like candles at an altar. He knew the road well. Everett took another swig from his flask, and the fire tasted bitter this time. His mind mulled, and he thought about that box in the locker down the hall. He thought about the keys in his coat, the one to the evidence locker and the ones to his car outside, both tucked inside the pocket. And he took another drink. Thank you very much for listening. Your thoughts and time are very valuable, so thank you for choosing to spend some of it here with me. Wherever you are out there, know that you are not alone and that we will be here to keep telling stories through the night. If you enjoyed the story, Please like and subscribe, and tell friends and family who like this sort of stuff. As an independent writer and artist, producing these works takes a ton of time and effort, done purely from a passion to tell stories. If you want to support me directly, please consider checking out my other works at www.fictionalpage.com, or become a patron at patreon.com/fictionalpage, or use the links below. Thanks for listening, and until next time. Fictional Page